on Twitter. You can follow me at coach_Swingle. So getting into empty, mentioned it in the beginning of the presentation, having a week-to-week plan going into each week, because most of the teams, at least in the conference that we played in, and I know a lot of teams that many of you guys are playing in, week to week will feature at least a set or two of empty throughout the game, if not more, depending on that week-to-week game plan. And then also getting into, like I talked about, playing strictly empty teams. Personally, we played one team that 95% of the time they were going all to empty sets, mainly throwing the football, as well as doing some quarterback run games, some jet. And then about 5% of the time, they would get into some one-back stuff, run some zone read, things like that. Talking about personnel usage in both of those week-to-week plans and a strictly empty team plan, as well as dialing up some pressure packages to get after the quarterback out of a couple different looks, and some coverage adjustments out of those personnel and pressure packages as well. All right, so jumping in to the week-to-week. As I talked about before, most teams are going to show you on film going into the week some sort of an empty formation, whether it be 10% of the time, 15% of the time, whatever the case may be. As a defensive guy, you have to have a plan and have an answer for when that team goes to empty. So as far as what I've done in the past, we've been based out of a 3-man front. And with that, it gave us the ability to do some drop 8 coverage, which I think really helped us out a lot. I'll talk about that as far as handling empty and handling teams that do want to get into some pass situations on third down, doing some stuff out of 3-high coverage. But going into every week, we wanted to install some sort of a coverage plan and a check to empty. And essentially what we would do in our base coverages is we would have some sort of a middle of the field open and a closed check to empty. So whenever we were in some sort of a middle of the field open coverage, they come out and empty. Okay, we have an automatic check to that, where we are in a middle of the field open coverage, getting into a coverage that is more favorable and that we practiced all week going up against that empty check. And then also when we're in a 1-high middle of the field closed alignment, we also have another check to empty out of that. That way, I'm a big fan of not going always to an automatic formation check to where, okay, they come out and empty, and every single time we're going to play some sort of a variation of quarters, or every time they come out and empty, we're going to play cover 3. Because at that point, once you show that either in film weeks before or going into the game, the first snap of empty, second snap of empty, you're playing all cover 3, the opposing team's offensive coordinator will catch on to that, and they'll start to take advantage of what you're doing. On top of those open and close checks, also talk about some weekly pressure packages, and those vary week to week as well, having 1 or 2 things that we can call from the box as a check to empty as well to dial up some pressure and bring some cover 0 behind it. So for example, one of our middle of the field close checks to empty would be this variation of cover 3 out of our drop 8 base look. This is out of our base personnel, and we were a 2-high team. So essentially we would roll our 1 split field safety down to be a flat defender, push our overhang linebacker into the box, and play cover 3. So whenever we were in some sort of a hot coverage, some sort of a fire zone coverage, we didn't necessarily want to be into that when a team would come out and empty. And once again, this varies week to week because you have to look at what exactly are these teams trying to do when they get into empty, where some teams do strictly want to throw the ball. So you might get into more of a drop 8 look, where other teams, they might be out of their base personnel looking to do some stuff out of jet, off a power read, get some quarterback involved into the QB draw game. So with that, you might want to bring an edge defender here, slant some guys inside, and get that run game to spill to some of our overhangs, which is what our base defense was predicated around. Here, this is one example of a middle of the field close check. We'll be playing basic cover 3 to the 2-man side. We get deep third, flat defender here playing outside leverage number 2, matching the seam to the flat. We got the hook defender playing inside leverage number 2, forcing everything out to the flat defender over here. A little bit different variation over here to the trip side. We'll still have our deep third corner over here. Our overhang linebacker, who's more of a nickel type out of our base personnel, is going to be playing the flat to that side. And now our apex player here, which is one of our more athletic inside linebackers, he'll be apexing the number 3 receiver, but post-snap, once he reads pass, he'll really try to push to a high hook or an outside leverage number 3 and force that to funnel back into our low hole spy player inside here, as well as into the middle of the field safety right there. That's just one variation that we played in one particular week. Other weeks, like I said, if teams want to do some more jet motion, get some quarterback in the power run game, we could bring one of these guys off the edge and just play traditional cover three. We could do some stuff where if they really wanted to get the ball to their number 2 receiver over here, we could lock him up and play man coverage, bump him out, and play a different version of cover three. A variety of different things you can do at drop 8. These are just a few of the things that we look to do week to week, depending on what the opposing team was giving us.
Yeah, Coach, I just want to interrupt you real quick. Give me a situation in a game plan you would actually run this coverage here. I mean, I know cover 3 is a traditional coverage, but what empty look would make you guys run a heavy dose of cover 3?
Right. More so, honestly, this was just if we were already in some sort of a one high coverage, single high cover 3 look. But essentially, if teams want to do some things, for example, to this look where they want to run maybe some underneath crossing routes, we have a high hole and low hole player. That way we can match the possible dig route here. So more of the passing off underneath stuff, different things like that. Whereas things like flood, some curl flat stuff, we might want to get into more of our too high look. So it just kind of depended week to week. Like you said, lots of different things that teams can do out of empty. And as I kind of transition into more of the specialty empty coverage against teams that want to play predominantly empty formations on offense, we can kind of take a look at some of the things that we did like to do as opposed to pattern matching. Because the biggest thing that I've seen as far as pass game wise out of empty is teams like to do a whole bunch of things if they are predicated on getting the ball out in space, out into the passing game. So there's really not as good of a game plan per se saying, oh, we're going to look to take away this, because teams that do want to get to empty as their base, from what I've seen and what I've gone against, is you have to have a couple different answers. So not necessarily teaching, oh, well, we're really looking for this particular route combination this week, but more just really being fundamentally sound in what our rules are for this coverage so that we can pattern match any sort of route combination that's given to us.
Yep, perfect.
This would be an example of one of our middle of the field open checks to empty. So like I said, if we're in some sort of our too high shell, middle of the field open coverage, we see a team come out and empty, we can get right away to this variation where we'll play what I like to call quarters lock. So to the weak side, to the two-man side, we'll play a palms 2 read as we have this extra overhang defender here. He can be a run support player as well as late to push and sort of condense that 2 by side, the 2 displaced side over here. So both of the corner and the high safety here, we playing 2 read, eyes on number 2. If number 2 goes to the flat inside of linebacker depth, which we dictated under 5 yards, the corner will jump the number 2 to the flat, and now it'll exchange, and the high safety will now take number 1. If they both clear vertical, it just turns into man-to-man essentially on the fly. If they want to, run an in-breaking route here, this linebacker will wall him off and not let number 2 cross his face. He'll trail late or get his eyes over to number 1, depending on the coverage variation. A couple different things you can do on the backside. This is just one example of a possible coverage opportunity that we did to empty. On the front side, so to the 3 receiver side, we'll do a variation of quarters where we'll lock up on anything deep, this play side corner. The overhang to that side, we'll be playing outside leverage. He'll be trying to squeeze number 2 inside to the safety and the hook match 3 player. So essentially, if this number 2 receiver runs vertical, he has him. If he runs on the wheel, he has him. If he breaks inside, he'll push him inside until number 3 can't let number 2 or number 3 out leverage him, get outside of him to the numbers here. We have our inside linebacker to that side playing our hook drop or a match 3. So he'll push to number 3, not letting number 3 cross his face. So if 3 wants to run some sort of a vertical and then in-breaking route, he'll kind of wall him off over there, knowing that he has a low hole or a spy player on the backside to help him with any sort of underneath crossing route underneath. Our quarter safety here has a 3-2 read, so he's looking to match 3 vertical. If 3 goes out or goes underneath, he'll look to take number 2 on any sort of vertical route, whether that be a corner route. He'll break late on that, knowing that he has help from the outside leverage of the linebacker here, or if they run a post, he's really looking to help on the number 3 or on number 2 rather, if number 3 goes inside or goes outside.
Yeah.
And then up front, go ahead.
Yeah, Ryan, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We had a question come through here. Do you have any autos that are built in against empty with motion? Any blitzes or coverage checks?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, week to week, we will do different things. So what we did is every week we would have a middle of the field open and a middle of the field closed check. This would just be one example of a possible middle of the field open check. And like I said earlier in the presentation, depending on what that team liked to do that particular week, we could change some things to where if they were liking to bring some sort of a jet motion and run some power read per se, or some jet to the 2-man side, we could bring some sort of a backside weak pressure blitz to really get an extra force player to the jet side. It really just depended upon week to week what the other team was trying to do, and then building a couple things in off of our base calls, because all of these coverages that I've shown you were based out of our base defense, but just having a couple things, 1 or 2 things in middle of the field open and 1 or 2 things in middle of the field closed that you can get to week to combat empty. But we did not have every single week, we weren't running the exact same thing to check to empty, just so that we wouldn't have as many tendencies to be able to be scouted upon on film.
Yep, got it.
Also, with those middle of the field open, middle of the field closed checks, we would have 1 or 2 pressure checks, and this would be dictated from the sideline. So those were the auto calls on the field. If a team comes out and empty, we'll automatically get to those depending on whether it's middle of the field open or middle of the field closed coverage. Now from the box, I would have the ability to call, okay, they come out and empty, let's get to one of these pressure calls, and we would have one of these 2 built in week to week, our Cobra and Viper blitzes. So these are just 6-man pressures. We would play primarily cover 0 behind it. To the 2-man side, if we would play that into the boundary, we could have some sort of a 2 read going on. But if they were to the field, we would just lock it up. Then also to this 3-man side, we could do a variation of 2 read on the number 2 and number 3 receiver as well, with this overhang player and the safety who would roll down. So if there was a condensed spacing formation into the boundary on either side, we could have some sort of a 2 read variation built in within our cover 0 man coverage rules. But here were our 2 main pressure checks for empty calls. We did have a couple more that we'd used throughout the season, but these were our 2 that we would carry week to week depending on what we liked. Cobra, we're bringing our ends. We're going to pinch down into the B gaps. Nose would go opposite of the quarterback's throwing hand. Our will or inside linebacker would go to the quarterback's throwing hand. So in both of these pictures, the quarterback would be a right-handed quarterback. He would go to the left with the quarterback's arm being on his right side. And then just both of our overhang edge guys, our Sam and our Rover, would come off the edge, being those contain rushers. Our different variation of this would be our whip stunt, which is where our ends take a hard outside angle to be the contain rush. Our outside edge rushers, now instead of blitzing off the edge and being those contain rushers, they'll influence upfield rush and then loop back underneath to try to take advantage of a guard possibly setting too far out or checking the nose of that will. And either way, with it being empty, once you bring 6-man pressure, that quarterback has to be hot off of one of the defenders. So whether our hope is that we can get one of these interior guys freed up right now, or worst case scenario, we get one of these guys coming hot off the edge into the quarterback's face right now. Next, going into if you're facing a team that only runs empty, I talked about it in the beginning of the presentation. We played one team this year in conference play that was strictly an empty team. 95% of the time, they were in empty. So in this case, we couldn't just have one middle of the field open and one middle of the field closed check. We had to have a couple different things that we could do coverage-wise, play some man coverage against it, play some zone, as well as bring some pressures, try to get in the quarterback's face, as opposed to just playing cover 0 behind it, having the ability to get to some different things against empty. So with that, we had to tie this modified plan to our base defense with easy adjustments for the players, while also allowing them to play within their skill sets and play within their normal coverage rules and allow them to do things that might have been a little bit out of the ordinary, but within the realm of the techniques they were being taught week to week as they would in any other game plan, just maybe doing it out of a couple different positions that they were normally used to playing. And I'll get into that as I get through the rest of the presentation. So talking about personnel, I touched on it before as far as week to week, but if a team is going to go all empty, what is it that they are trying to accomplish by going empty? Are they running 2 tight end sets and really getting the quarterback involved as that extra run player? All right, then I might stay in more of my base personnel. Are they going into a true empty 5 wide personnel that maybe you would want to switch to more of a base for that week, going into more of a dime where you take, as we did, take your 2 overhangs out and replace them with 2 corners or safeties to give yourself the ability to play some more man coverage and get some better cover guys out there. Different variations as well, being more of a traditional base personnel, as we saw a lot of 11 personnel this past season. If a team's just trying to simply shift out of their normal alignment and get into empty by shifting a back out of the backfield, you might be able to get away with playing more of your base defense. It just kind of depends on really analyzing what that other team is trying to accomplish by going to empty. And then, like I said before, are they trying to go to more of a Q run game and get that one back offense out of a empty personnel set, or are they really just trying to drop back and sling the ball around and get to what a lot of people think of when they think of empty? So our game plan for the team that we played was they wanted to go a lot of true 5 wide personnel. So our thing was we had to get our best cover guys on the field, and that was our dime personnel. And our normal dime personnel was still in a 3-man front, but we still needed to find a way to manufacture pressure on the quarterback. So we did switch to the majority of this week, which we still had in our week-to-week game plan, being able to go to a 4-man front, but going to a 4-man front and using our dime personnel. And our whole logic behind this was to create pass rush one-on-ones by getting that extra guy involved in the pass rush regularly, and use different line games and different blitz packages to allow our best rushers to rush the passer. So going into that pressure package I talked about, we did use dime personnel blitzes that we hadn't necessarily used in the past. So we really simplified the blitz terminology, limited it to a couple different blitzes, but allowed us to play 3 or 4 coverages behind it. And our best pass rushers were our 2 overhangs out of our base personnel. But so in that case, we moved those 2 overhangs down to defensive ends in a 4-man front, moved our best pass rushing defensive end in our base 3-man front, moved him to more of our 3 technique in our 4-man front, brought 2 extra corners or our backup safety who were our best cover guys and played them as our nickel and dime, as our overhang players, to be able to play some more man coverage, as I talked about, to replace those overhangs in our base structure while still being able to stay in similar to a lot of our coverage principles that we had in our 3-man front, and being able to do those out of our odd front while getting those pass rushers into the best situations to make plays on the quarterback. We also added with that, moving our overhangs, who were primarily cover guys with a lot of speed, the ability to rush the passer. We allowed them, by playing defensive ends, to do some stuff where we would drop both the defensive ends in some fire zone stuff, and then where we just do some sim pressure things, which I feel like is a really hot topic this offseason, where we would bring 2 of potentially our inside backers, an inside backer and overhang, and then drop both of those ends out and play some variations of cover 3 and some split field quarters coverage as well. So our first blitz that we really had a lot of success with against empty was what we called our swarm blitz. This one involved our single inside linebacker out of our 2 high shell and our overhang blitz to the blitz call. And our blitz call was dictated by either king or queen, king being to the back, queen being away from the back, obviously. And when you're going up against an empty team, you don't have that. So this week it was more of strong and weak, strong being to the 3 receiver side, weak being to the 2 receiver side. And we'd also have long and short, long being to the field, short being to the boundary. And in the swarm blitz, the nose and the D end to the call would go gap away. And then the backside D tackle and the backside D end would have our twist stunt, which is just a DT tackle, or a TE tackle rather, twist, traditional twist game, nothing really too crazy there, but just a way to kind of get some movement, get some guys into some better pass rush situations like I talked about. The 3 coverages that we played behind it was cover zero, so our traditional man coverage behind it, having the ability to play some two read stuff on the two receiver side or on 2 and 3 to the trip side. We would also drop both of our ends out of the stunt and play a true cover 3 look and spin our free safety down and spin our inside DB over the top to get a true cover 3 look there. We'd also play some quarters lock where we would drop the end opposite the blitz call to play quarters to that side and play some two read to the backside. So this was our swarm 0. So our swarm blitz would be coming from the weak side here. It's the two receiver side. 0, meaning that we're playing cover 0 behind it. So our one high safety would now roll down and replace this backside weak overhang, and we'd have the ability to either play man-to-man, or if there was a condensed spacing into the boundary here, we could play some two read like I talked about in the previous slide. And then here's just a diagram of the swarm blitz. So we have this defensive end looping outside. We had two variations of it, one where the defensive end loops outside, and we have that whip stunt that I talked about where he'll really influence upfield and now drive back underneath into that B gap, try to get that tackle to really overset, and now he comes right back underneath him. Linebacker would always set the shade to the blitz call. He'll cross center's face. He'll get into that weak side B gap. Defensive tackle, our nose here, will loop across center's face into that opposite A gap, and then here we'll have that twist stunt on the backside for the backside defensive end and backside defensive tackle. Over here, we're still just playing cover 0 to the passing strength with the ability to where if we get trips into the boundary, we can play some two read on 2 and 3 here, with that number 1 receiver always being in man-to-man coverage. And we're always running with motion in cover 0, as we didn't really want to spin a whole lot, just with the personnel not being used to that was on the field at the time. Here was our cover 3 variation, so we're still executing the same blitz here. This time the overhang will be blitzing outside as opposed to that whip stunt that I talked about. And now here, still have that same inside linebacker going A gap. Shade is going to cross face into that backside A gap. Defensive tackle, that 3 technique still is dropping to be that contain rusher. Now we just lose the twist stunt as we're dropping both of those converted defensive ends who were our base personnel overhangs, and they're dropping into a hook curl drop. So like I talked about, this gives them the added ability to give that sort of that sim pressure look while also allowing them to do things that they've done all season, being pass coverage guys. So it's not like we're asking a 270-pound defensive end who's never dropped into pass coverage before to now have to go out and cover a very athletic slot receiver here at number 3. Other than that, it is just traditional cover 3. We'll spin this inside. Our dime guy here would spin up and replace, as our one high safety will spin down to replace the blitzer. He'll spin up to replace the deep middle third safety. Then our last variation here that we ran in this game for that swarm blitz is just quarters lock. So we'll only drop the end opposite the blitz call. So here we'd still be running it weak, drop the end opposite. He'll be a hook and match player. We'll play some sort of variation of quarters, can vary that week to week depending on what terminology and what structure of quarters that your team uses. And then on the backside, we'll play some two read with the one high safety spinning down. And now they're just playing some two read. Or if we get that trips into the boundary, a lot of space to the field, they have the option to also just play lock coverage, as he knows that he doesn't have this inside guy helping in a traditional palms or different variations of two read that you can run. Also talking about it out of our single blitz, or if we're just playing traditional drop 7 coverage, we can do some different things without bringing extra guys to create pass rush matchups to our advantage. Out of our forefront, there was a heavy emphasis to get that extra rusher and that ability to also play dime with the guys that we brought into the game, and then also being able to get back to our base defense to do some drop 8 things as well was something that worked very well for us in this week. Like I said before, we did move our best 3-man rush defensive end down to a 3 technique. The overhangs down to defensive ends were our 2 best blitz pass rushers, so it allowed them to get in one-on-one matchups against some tackles that might not be able to combat their speed and quickness off the edge that you might see week to week. We also used a wide double 3 technique front, so that way both of the guards are matched up one-on-one with the defensive tackles, and the defensive ends are also in one-on-ones with the offensive tackles. We would also walk up that Mike linebacker over the center, so it forces him to account for him as an empty. You're always going to be seeing a 5-man pass protection. We could do some things where we could bring him occasionally. We could stunt him with one of the defensive tackles, or we could drop him, play some sort of a one rat, things like that, or just play some straight cover one. So the ability to play some cover 3 behind it as well. And then we could also bring him and bring an overhang and then just drop one of the ends, play some fire zone 3, or we could bring him and drop the ends and play a traditional cover 3 look as well. That's all I got for the presentation portion. I will get into the cut-ups that I have of it if there are not any questions at this time.
No, it looks pretty good right now. Yeah, we can jump into some film.
All right, so this was against a team that had gone all empty the previous season, but in the scrimmages that we had scouted them and had a film on them from the preseason, they were going to more of a one-back team, but we still wanted to account for the fact that they might transition back to an empty team, which they did in the second half a little bit. So we did have a couple of coverage calls built in to automatically check. This would be one that I believe we're going to get to checking to a pressure situation. So we are going to play some cover 0 behind it. We do have a little bit too much off coverage, and our overhang here to the field doesn't get the blitz calls. That's why it's important to always be on the same page and always be able to communicate well, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, so that everyone that's involved in the blitz is getting after the pass rush, and everyone that should be in coverage is in coverage. So here we play cover 0, bring these 6 here. We should be playing man-to-man over here. They have the ability to play some 2 read with the corner's eyes being on number 2. It looks like they are playing some 2 read here. So we do get this free rusher off the edge, forces the quarterback to throw the ball a little bit sooner than he would like to. Force a bad pass here as they do go all hitches. We plan some off-man coverage. Get that free rusher off the edge. Forces a bad throw. So this was our middle of the field closed check here this week. This was a variation of cover 3. We will be bringing this inside linebacker here. So we are just playing traditional match cover 3 here. So this would be our hook dropper here, deep third, flat drop here, hook player on the backside. Our middle of the field safety needs to rotate to get more middle of the field as opposed to hanging on this hash. Don't play middle of the field where the ball's at. Got to play true middle of the field of the actual field position. We have our seam flat player over here and our deep third player over here. So we get a speed out here for number 1, a good call against cover 3 here. Force him to throw that ball into the boundary, gets it out a little bit quicker than he would like before that receiver can get his head around. But that would be one of our middle of the field closed checks that we can get to against empty. So this was against the team that we played that was 95% empty. So here we were in a variation of cover 3 that we were playing. We did not drop the ends in this one, but as you can see, we're in double 3 techniques, and we'll do some twist games here with the 2 defensive ends and defensive tackles to try to get a little bit of extra rush onto the quarterback. We don't get as much of a rush, but we force them to throw the deep ball to the outside. Their number 1 receiver was this guy here at the bottom of the screen. Force him to throw into a cover 3 spot, slot fade, where we exchange nicely there as the corner drops into the deep third, break up the pass. Here you can get a look at the loop stunt here that we did. So we get a guy in the quarterback's face, don't necessarily rush the throw per se, but had he gotten off that read, he's going to have to force the ball to where he doesn't want to. And so going back to personnel, these were our two overhang linebackers in our 3-4 base defense playing defensive ends. Now that gives them the ability, if we want to bring this guy and this guy on that swarm blitz, they have the ability to drop out and play some hook drop as well. But limiting it to just a hook drop, no matter what the coverage drop would be, just so they don't have to learn a whole bunch of new things. So here's another middle of the field closed look here. We're going to play a variation of cover 3. This time we do have that Mike walked up and he will bail. So we do get some 1-1 pass rush situations, playing cover 3, deep third, seam flat, hook curl drop match number 3. And then he'll be dropping opposite to the weak side as we have the seam flat, deep third, and then a middle of the field safety that is not pictured. They run a tunnel screen here. Force them to get into third down. And the big difficulty that we had against this team is they were starting in the gun at about 6.5, 7 yards. So we really did have to put an extra emphasis on getting the passer in order to get back there. But just because they got the ball out so quick and they were already set so far back in the gun that it was a little bit difficult to get to him. But we did get to him at times and had some success with a few different things that we did. Here we get that tunnel screen. Retrace underneath. Force him to play third down. Once again, forcing this center to account for that guy. You get a 1-1 pass rush right here. All right, so here was a look at the swarm blitz. So we'll be doing it from the weak side here. So we'll have the inside linebacker as well as the overhang here will come off the edge. So we'll get a 6-man pressure, allowing us to get that one extra guy into the rush. We can play some 2 read here on the backside and giving these two guys the ability to play some read on number 2 and number 3 in the slot over here as well. So here we get that guy free off the edge. Don't do a good job of tackling in space. Have the opportunity to get a sack. We do have to get it, but this was a freshman playing against some Division I kids, so I'll give him a break this last year, but
no excuses next year.
Exactly. Still an opportunity for us to get into a third down situation, which is the goal at the end of the day. Get 2 guys right through. Just the end zone copy of it.
Coach, I'm curious, when you do any of these simulated pressures here, do you do any essentially quality control on yourself as far as which leg is up, which leg is back, in a sense of when you're blitzing, when you're not blitzing? I only bring that up because that's some stuff that I look at too when I'm watching film. When teams like to bluff blitzes or bring those simulated pressures to, a lot of guys will subconsciously put their dominant foot forward and try to get the best rush possible.
Right.
I just want to get your thoughts on that as far as, doing, like I said, some quality control for yourself to make sure you're not tipping anything off the team.
Yeah, I mean, during the season, honestly, we didn't do a whole lot of that just because we were trying to move so many guys around. It was such a new system. Obviously not an excuse to not do some self-scouting, but we did to a certain extent. But obviously, I think in the off season is the time that we really will look to work on guys as far as that mental aspect, working as far as really cleaning up those things of tells as to when who's blitzing and things like that.
Yeah, little things, right? Like shoulder square, your shoulder tilted out, dominant foot forward, weak foot back, so on and so forth.
Right. So here was a different one that we did. This was our nail blitz. So this would be from the strong side overhang. We would drop the mic into a high hole, a little rat player here, and play some cover 0 behind it. So we get some jet motion. They'll fake the jet and then come back on the underneath screen to number 3. We do a good job of retracing by the D tackle there. Get a nice tackle for the loss.
Yeah, that's a good job.
So here's just a single pressure. We get This was more of our base defense, so we'll have a one rat call here. So we have man coverage, free safety high, and we'll have a rat player with a single blitzer being this inside linebacker. So this was more back into our base defense. Still have a dime personnel, so we still do have 2 extra DBs to replace our overhangs, but we'll bring our one overhang as that spy, as that rat player. We'll send our inside linebacker on a blitz here, play man coverage across the board. Force fourth down. This was once again out of our base 3-man front. Our dime personnel will have a cross plug blitz here to the weak side here. We'll play man coverage behind it, man free behind it.
Perfect.
The end zone angle here. So here we'll have this blitz. The play side linebacker will be going to the A gap. He'll cross over into the B gap, get our nose going away. Outside guys are free to contain rush on the outside. And does a good job of getting back outside once he gets underneath, being that contained player.
Yep.
So this is going more into this was our last week this season. This was our quarter, so our middle of the field open check. Then I believe from the sideline, as you can see, our guys bump down up in the box. We decided to get into more of a pressure look. So they check to the sideline, see that we're in quarters. They check their play. Now we'll get into more of a cover zero, bring some pressure. So they run stick here to the play side. Get some pressure in his face right now. Get that guy off the edge. Force him to throw off his back foot. Make a play on the ball. Get that guy right up the middle. That's the best case scenario there. We get our inside linebacker free, playing man coverage, make a play on the ball.
Well done.
So originally we were in our middle of the field open check. They check to the sideline. We check back to the sideline and get into a cover zero, bring some heat. And get a free shot on the quarterback. All right. That is all I got film-wise.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, just have a few questions here, Coach, for you. Can you talk a little bit about the communication process between, I know you just showed some look at me stuff, but if a team is tempoing you, right? Because a lot of spread teams that do go empty will tempo you and, move as fast as possible. Talk a little bit about the communication process of being able to get the calls out quickly to the players.
Yeah, so I think that just goes back to building into your game plan, having set things into the game plan when we get into certain situations. Us as coaches know going into our Tuesday practice, what are some things that we want to do on third and long, what are some things that we want to do in different situations, so that during practice, our players know that call sheet as well, and they can expect, all right, it's third and long. What are the 4 or 5 things that we worked on this week to combat third and long based on what the other team's trying to do? So they already kind of think, oh, I already know what coach is going to call because we already communicated it in the practice week. And then also from a play calling perspective, being able to recognize the situation, recognize the possible formation if a team wants a sugar huddle and things like that, and then try to get the call out as quickly as possible so that our players have enough time to adjust to the formation, or if they do want to check to the sideline, having the ability for us to have that confidence with each other and with our team to be able to check the checks if need be.
Yep. Perfect. The last one I had here, and the chat is open, by the way, if there's any coaches that do have any questions. Last question I just had here, and I know you see a ton of it just based off the league that you play in and how much talent is in that league. When you see a number one receiver that's dominant, right, far and beyond any other receiver on the field, what are some things that you like to do to neutralize that? Are you still bringing those heavy pressures and playing that cover 1, cover 0, or are you doing a lot more, like I think I saw in that clip too, where you bailed out the cover 3, just to be able to protect the roof a little bit. So talk a little bit about what you like to do if you have a number one receiver that's pretty dominant.
Yeah, so we did a couple things against a couple different teams. We played Team Euclid. They were one of the better teams in our region. They had a really good number one receiver that he would kill teams deep on a bunch of fade balls. So we knew going into that week, particularly, that was the one that comes to mind, where we did some things where we could play, we like to call cloud coverage, where our overhang will go out and press the number one receiver to that side, and now our corner will drop to be sort of that third high safety. So if we do get trips, that's something that's available for us to do. Some other different things is we can protect him with the safety over the top. Now that might put a little bit more stress to 3-by-1 formations on your inside linebacker having to be that high hole player to match number 3 across. But at the end of the day, you do have to put your players in position to make plays and to allow you to take away some things. So even though they may be taking away something on the backside, you have to trust that your guys on the to the trip side, to opposite that single receiver, have to make up for some deficiencies as well. At the end of the day, it's about players, not play calls, as a lot of people will talk about. So to a certain extent, you do have to have some players and play some different things. You can't always take away everything. So some things that we like to do was that cloud coverage, doing some things where we might roll down that safety, play some what some people refer to as sky coverage, where that safety will come down and press, and now that corner can bail out and play a deep half, where we'll invert some cover 2. We can play some traditional cover 3 sky, where that safety will roll down to the single receiver side, press him, and that corner will bail out. You can play some traditional cover 3, where we'll just bail out and really just try not to get beat deep over the top. Play some quarters where we can bail out as well. So there's a variety of different things we can do.
Yeah, sure.
Just more so going into what are they trying to do other than throw to that single receiver potentially, or that number one guy. So how can we best put our other guys in position to also take away the other things they want to do, while at the same time accounting for that number one guy on the backside.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, right, it comes down to the Jimmies and Joes, not so much the X and O's, right? So you got to put the guys in position to make plays, and they essentially got to make the plays. So just checking the chat now. I believe that is all the questions that we had. Any last words, Coach Swingle, before we sign off?
I'm just looking forward to continuing a great off-season of live clinics here at Victory Sports. Got Coach Weaver, could not make it on today. He'll be rescheduled for the 17th, and we'll also have our next week's speaker up for you guys shortly. And then looking forward to a plethora of quality speakers coming up after that as well.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Coach Swingle, for presenting on a short notice. I'm Chris Haddad. We'll be back each Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time right here on Twitter and on YouTube. So we'll see you guys next week.